So let's have a little bit of a chat about what I'm going to be doing today. So off the back of the valve plate testing that we did the other week, we saw that there was, let's just say, some slight difference between my elastic strength potential and my static strength potential. Makes complete sense. I've been doing nothing but pretty much focusing on my sprint work and the plyometric side of things for the past 18 months, and I've pretty much entirely neglected any of my core strength exercises. So let's just say, for example, squats, benches and deadlifts have all taken a little bit of a backseat in order for me to bring up my running technique, my sprint technique, and try to address all of the weaknesses in terms of gait, mobility that I've seen coming along with that. After we did the testing, it became fairly apparent that one of the easiest pieces of low-hanging fruit that I could go for to try and see some improvement on the numbers and hopefully get a transfer over onto my force production would be to start reintroducing some strength training back into my program. What I've chosen to go with to begin with is simply just starting off with some safety bar squat work. I just like the feel of that. My shoulder's still a little bit sore from a rotator cuff injury that I sustained earlier in the year in March. So I'm just working around that a little bit at the moment. So for me at the moment, doing a back squat with a normal flat bar on my back isn't really a feasible option. So safety bar is what I'm going with for the time being. Now in the session, just in terms of preparing for that, because I've not done it for quite a while, but I think this is a suitable way to look at it from anybody's point of view, is how do you address your soft tissue work for preparing best for that session? And the way I'm going to do it is just by starting off with some soft tissue work on the underside of the foot, working the plantar fascia. I've got a little bit of stiffness in my Achilles tendon and my soleus and my calf. So I'm just going to address that through some mobility tools, but the easiest way for me to get, again, a really nice, easy, low-hanging piece of fruit for this one is just to start to loosen that tissue on the underside of my feet. When I'm doing this, I'm probably going to do it for about 20 to 30 seconds on each side, applying a fairly decent amount of force into, it's actually a lacrosse ball. I do like a tennis ball when I'm doing this because there's some give and feedback. You can feel your foot moving around the tennis ball and there's a good feedback loop on it. After I've done these, I'm going to go onto the cable, and still as the main focus of the session is to improve my lifting and my strength for sprinting. I'm going to be working just a little bit of rotation and unilateral work where I'm in a split stance, where I'm focusing on the back leg that's operational. You're going to be getting some hip flexor stretching and work all the way down from the hip down to the knee through the rec fan. And I've been going through my warm-up. I've decided that I wanted to add another mobility exercise into the day just to try and free up the hamstrings a little bit. Also to try and get a little bit more work on the opposing hip flexor. Another important thing, because I'm going to be squatting, I want to make sure that my midsection of my core is as braced as possible as I'm integrating that limb movement around it. So I'm going to use the bench and the bar to provide some bracing support. So I'm actively bracing into the barbell. The down leg, I'm going to try and create a stretch at the hip flexor. And the leg that I'm raising, I'm trying to create some length through the hamstring whilst maintaining the dorsiflexed foot. And again, this was just something I felt as I was going through the warm-up that I wanted to introduce. Felt like the right thing to do, just to try and get a little bit more stability and integration on the movement. Now we're basically up at working, well, we are one warm-up set away from doing our main working set. So we're at 80 kilos here. I am going to be using the VBT machine today to monitor my lifts. This is essentially a piece of string on a tether that connects to a box which is on the floor. It will show me how quick I am moving the bar in terms of meters a second. So because I want to keep that explosive dynamic element to my lifting, it's going to be important for me to measure the speed that I'm accurately getting per rep and making sure that I'm not getting too big of a drop off on those. Another useful application of a VBT machine, not only to measure your speed of output on your main working sets, is it can give you a really good indication on the day of what you can expect to be lifting in terms of what your peak strength is. I would generally say that most people are going to be within a spectrum of 5 to 15% of maximum potential for strength reps for a day. So let's say, for example, your max rep was 100 kilos. You might come in on your absolute worst day, and maybe the best that you can do on that day is like 85, 87 kilos. Generally though, we're probably going to be closer to 5% less than what your top working weight is. So for example, again, on any general given day, I can know that if my speed that I'm hitting on the reps on here is reflective of what I've been doing when I'm getting up to my top working sets, and that there's not a big drop off in terms of meters per second, I fairly can accurately guess that my main working sets for the day I'm going to be able to achieve without too much to worry about. So I'll get in on my last warm-up set on these, and just first working set of the day. We're going to be doing 5 reps at 100 kilos, which, as I said, is a little over body weight at the moment. The VBT tether is going to track on the phone, although we won't be able to check that until after the setup's done. But the aim is to move them between above 0.5 of a metre a second. So let's see how we go. Okay, so the last rep on the set was 0.52, so I'm going to guess that all of them were above 0.5. Usually the last rep in the set should be the slowest. It's been a while since I've done any heavy squats. By all means, these are not heavy squats. My best lifetime set is 200 for 3, which again is not the most impressive weight in the world. But as an introduction, I'm happy with that. If I can be moving on to those working sets today above 0.5 of a metre a second, at 100 kilos, that is a good start for me. I am not resting on the bench when I do these sets. I'm pausing at the point that I'm feeling my hamstrings or my glutes touch the bench. And the reason that I'm doing that, when we do the testing on the plates, the counter movement jump is performed with a drop into position and then explosive reactive jump. The other jump is performed from a pretty much static position. So here I'm essentially trying to replicate getting into the bottom of that hold and then producing force without any counter movement to give you some elastic strength. We're going to carry on working the set through the day. I hope that's been useful information. As I said, the exercises at the beginning that I was doing are a good general overview of what you should be aiming for to get out of your session. You know, we still want to maintain joint health and tissue quality whilst we're introducing heavy lifting back into the equation. The exercise selection that you do pick is going to be entirely dependent on what your body needs. So whilst the ones that I've shown are a good general indicator of what you should be going for, they are specific to me and what I know and feel. I know my body very well. I've been using these exercises for many months now, and they're a really good way of me getting activated for these style of movement patterns. I use them both at the gym and at the track. So it's always next set now. I thought I'd just include the information about the data from the VBT machine. The first rep in the set was 0.57 and the last rep in the set, as we said, was 0.52. Usually when I'm using this, I will typically, if we're looking for a specific number range, aim not to have a 10% deficit between the fastest rep of the set and the slowest rep of the set. And like I've said before, in relation to sprinting, we're typically looking for, on a session, a really nice grouping. And what I mean by that is you wouldn't want one rep in the set to be moving at, let's say for example, 0.75 meters of a second, and then have all 4 of the remaining reps in the set be 0.35, 0.25, 0.5. It's just really inconsistent and not a good way to collect a good overall pool of data. Yes, you were very explosive on one, but the rest of the set went to shit, so it's pretty much useless. Likewise, when you're at the track, you want a nice tight grouping on a set. Unless you're going for an out-and-out PB day, a general training session should have a really tight grouping. And what I mean by grouping, if it doesn't make sense, is imagine archery. You're going to be more successful overall rather than getting 1, 10 and 3 that didn't score or 2 that didn't score. You're going to be much better off getting all 3 of your arrows in 8s or 9s. So whilst not the top score that you can achieve, excuse my cough, whilst not the top score that you can achieve, your grouping was consistent, and overall your training is going to follow that pathway and be more consistent as a result of that. Next set. So 0.53 on the last rep of the set. So again, it was probably a pretty decent set with hopefully a good grouping. Now, interesting on that, I can feel that ankle restriction on the left side. That is something I've been working through over the past 12 months or so. Maybe a little bit more work through it in the soft tissue beforehand, but the results I'm getting in the way that they feel today, I'm quite happy with what I did at the beginning of the session. We've got one more to go. So the second set was better than the first one. The first rep in the set was 0.6 of a metre a second. The fifth rep, the final rep in the set, was 0.53 of a metre a second. So again, a good overall group, and I'm happy with that. We're going to move into the last set of the day now. I'm fairly certain that all these are going to move well based off the numbers that we've done there. But just to reiterate, if anybody is familiar with the VBT velocity-based training, the meters a second that I'm referring to for these sets is the average velocity per set. I'm not describing the peak velocity in the set here. The peak velocity in the sets for those reps was about 1.2 meters a second. If I'm doing a compound strength lift like this, I'm probably going to be more concerned about what the average speed of the rep is, i.e. how fast is the rep moving through the full duration of length of the rep. If I was doing the movement, for example, like a hang clean or a power clean, I'd probably be more looking at the peak velocity, so how much force am I applying at any given point in the rep. And again, that'll just be like within a small snapshot window of the movement, not the full spectrum of the movement. So last set here, hopefully these move well, and then we'll be moving on with the rest of the session. Yeah, 0.4 out on the last one. I felt myself get a little off balance. I'm struggling a bit with a cold, so it was difficult for me to get that breath in at the top on the last rep and then stabilise. So I lost it a little bit in the bottom, and that's kind of reflective in the speed. Overall, happy with that. Today is a reintroduction back into the squatting, and we'll be continuing with this protocol for the rest of the training block. The rest of today's session, which I'm not going to show, is bench press and some accessory movements which are going to follow along a similar line of thought as the warm-up. So improving joint health, tissue quality, and overall movement that's going to contribute to me producing more force here on the bar, being able to produce better speed on the track, and when I retest in the new year, hopefully better results on the valve plates. Thanks for watching.